The slap echoed like thunder in a cathedral, and for a heartbeat the galaxy held its breath. The hall of the Accord, vast, crystalline, perfumed with alien incense, shivered with gasps and murmurs. Billions watched through shimmering hollow feeds as a towering Vanar soldier withdrew his claw, iridescent chitin gleaming under the ceremonial lights. The strike had been no accident. It was insult dressed as ritual, humiliation sculpted for spectacle, and its target, humanity's loudest symbol, stood unflinching at the center. General Nathaniel Cross did not stagger. The handprint seared across his weathered cheek was already purpling, but his metals clinked softly as he adjusted his posture, as though he had merely been brushed by dust. A grin tugged at his mouth. Not arrogance, not mockery, but something infinitely more dangerous. The grin of a man who had survived too much to be shaken by another's contempt. "You really shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice carrying clear through the vaulted chamber. In 3 heartbeats, the soldier's skull cracked like porcelain beneath his grip. The body slumped, the grin widened, and the silence shattered into chaos. Alien tongues shrieked in 50 dialects. The Vanar delegation roared for vengeance, mandibles clattering in outrage. Council scribes scurried like ants, their record spheres whirring desperately to capture every flicker of motion. And across the void of stars, humanity, messy, sarcastic, reckless humanity, watched the footage go viral before the blood had even dried. The memes were instantaneous. Florida man punches spacebug. Chuck Norris, found alive, disguised as American general. Someone layered laugh tracks over the recording. Another set it to the tune of an old Earth sitcom. The council tried to suppress it, but the internet does not bow to councils. General Cross, however, did not bask in the spectacle. In the privacy of his quarters, away from the chaos of the Accord, he sat beneath the pale light of alien suns streaming through the glass. His reflection looked back at him, metals heavy, eyes heavier. He wondered if, in those 3 seconds, he had doomed not just himself, but the fragile foothold humanity had carved among the stars. There had been one pair of eyes he could not shake, eyes that had not widened in awe or admiration, but narrowed in quiet sorrow. Ambassador Celine Ward, humanity's diplomat, the patient architect of this uneasy peace. She had negotiated for years, sacrificing comfort, pride, and health to bring Earth to this moment. Where Cross carried battle scars, she carried quiet exhaustion. And in her gaze, as the Vanar fell, there had been disappointment. Celine did not confront him directly. She did not need to. The silence between them when their paths crossed in the marble corridors was louder than any accusation. And though Cross had faced down armies, though he had stared into the abyss of battle without flinching, her silence gnawed at him in a way no alien threat ever had. The city of Ecliptus Prime whispered too. For even at the galactic heart, gossip was currency. Humans were brutes, they said, a species of primitives pretending at diplomacy, hiding their barbarism beneath thin veils of humor and bravado. Others whispered darker predictions: exile, execution, the end of humanity's seat at the Accord. The streets buzzed with speculation. Taverns roared with alien laughter at humanity's expense. And Celine's name was dragged through it all as the woman foolish enough to believe Earth could belong here. Still, not all whispers were disdain. Fear has its own gravity, and the footage of a man crushing a Vanar skull in seconds replayed in hushed reverence. Some aliens avoided humans now. Others treated them with nervous deference. Children played games where they pretended to be the general, delivering crushing justice in 3 seconds flat. Legends, after all, grow fastest in scandal soil. But Cross was no legend in his own mind. He remembered too well the weight of bodies on battlefields, the faces of soldiers who had trusted him and never come home. His grin, the one the galaxy now immortalized in gifs and parodies, had been carved long ago as armor. It hid the guilt, the exhaustion, the gnawing awareness that every victory cost more than it earned. Celine visited him only once after the incident, standing at the threshold of his quarters. She said nothing. He looked at her and thought to speak, an apology, a defense, anything, but words turned to ash on his tongue. She left before the silence could break. The summons from the council arrived the next morning. Cross was to stand trial before the 12, his actions judged not only as his own, but as the reflection of all humanity. The charge was barbarism. The potential sentence, exile from the Accord, perhaps worse. On Earth, the news was greeted with bizarre patriotism. Viewership for reality shows doubled when paired with Accord coverage. Someone released a line of microwave burritos branded 3-second justice. And in small towns, in bars, in cluttered living rooms, people spoke with pride. Our general showed them. Humanity, in its strange way, was more united in mockery than in fear. But Cross carried none of that with him as he walked into the crystalline chamber of judgment. His chains were ceremonial, unnecessary. The council knew he could snap them if he wished. The Vaynar delegation seethed, their grief twisted into venomous demands for blood. The chamber filled with the scent of alien spices and tension so thick it felt like a storm waiting to break. Celine was there, seated among the diplomats, her face unreadable. She did not look at him, and that hurt more than the council's accusations. The 12 spoke in turn, their voices layered in alien harmonics. They accused humanity of violence, of arrogance, of weakness masked by cruelty. They declared Cross's act proof of humanity's unfitness to join the Accord. Their words, for all their grandeur, felt like the droning of insects. Cross tilted his head as he listened, his faint grin returning, though not for the spectacle. It was habit, armor against despair. He thought of the worlds humanity had clawed into, the duct tape that held ships together, the laughter that filled trenches even as shells fell. He thought of Earth's endless absurdity, cats worshipped as gods, Florida man, headlines that made even seasoned soldiers blanch, duct tape patched across everything from engines to broken hearts. And he realized then what the council could not understand. Humanity had never been civilized, but had always endured. When the accusations ended, silence fell, and Cross felt the weight of the galaxy pressing upon him. The trial was not just about him, not just about one strike, one skull. It was about whether humanity, raw and unruly, could stand among the stars without apology. He straightened, metals clinking softly, grin still etched across his battered face. And though he said nothing yet, his eyes carried a promise that humanity did not bow. And perhaps, dear reader, that is the lesson buried in scandal and silence. Sometimes dignity is not in being gentle, nor in winning applause, but in standing unbroken when the universe demands you kneel. Humanity, for all its flaws, does not kneel. The council chamber smelled of judgment. 1,000 alien eyes burned down upon General Nathaniel Cross, each gaze sharpened by centuries of ceremony, precedent, and unyielding distrust. The crystalline arches overhead refracted the chamber's light into cruel, fractured prisms that painted him in shifting hues, as though even the architecture mocked his presence. His chains rattled as he shifted his stance, not out of fear, but out of boredom. The Vaynar delegation hissed venom through serrated mandibles, their grief twisted into hatred. Ambassador Celine Ward sat across the arena, her back rigid, her expression carved from marble. She did not meet his eyes. To the galaxy, she looked the perfect diplomat, calm, restrained, inscrutable. To Nathaniel, who had once heard her laugh over cheap instant noodles at an Earth outpost, that stillness was a blade piercing deeper than any alien accusation. The 12 began their chant of censure, their voices layered, resonant, alien harmonics coiling into a single suffocating verdict. Humanity was unfit. Humanity was dangerous. Humanity was reckless. Their words fell like stones into an endless abyss, yet Nathaniel felt none of their weight. What pressed upon him was Celine's silence, and the thought that perhaps she had begun to believe them. When the voices stilled, Nathaniel raised his head. His grin returned, irreverent as ever, though the ache in his chest threatened to fracture it. "You talk like scholars cataloging fossils," he said, his voice carrying inhuman bluntness, stripped of ceremony. "But fossils don't laugh when shells fall. Fossils don't stitch their wounds with duct tape and keep running. Fossils don't survive Florida Man." A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. One of the scribes whispered urgently to another, the words Florida Man skittering across their translation stones with no meaning. A murmur followed. "Is it a warlord? A myth?" Cross winked, and the chamber shuddered in unease. "You slapped me," he continued, voice low but iron-bound. "Not just me. My people. My history. My dead. And you expected us to bow, because that's what you've taught every species to do. But humanity bows to no hand, no claw, no counsel." He leaned forward, chains clinking softly. "You mistake mercy for weakness. You mistake laughter for ignorance. And you mistake me for a man who regrets defending his own." The Vainar erupted, mandibles snapping in fury, demanding his execution. The chamber teetered on the edge of violence. Yet before the council could respond, Selene stood. Her voice cut like a blade honed on patience. "If you condemn him, you condemn us all. Do not pretend otherwise." The hall stilled. Even the 12 leaned forward, crystalline eyes narrowing. Selene's words, soft but unshakable, filled the silence. "You call us reckless. Perhaps we are. But tell me, what other species sings in hunger? Who else builds cities from rubble, or finds humor in despair? Who else looks upon monsters and names them friends because they purr like cats?" A nervous chuckle fluttered through the chamber. Cats had already confused the galaxy beyond repair. "Humanity," she continued, "is not tame. We will never be tame. But we are the species that endures. You may chain one man, you may exile us from your chamber, but you cannot erase us. You cannot unmake what laughs in the dark." The silence after her words was heavier than any judgment. Cross stared at her, his grin fading into something gentler, something raw. She had not defended him for his sake. She had defended humanity for hers, for all of them. The council withdrew to deliberate. The chamber emptied, but whispers trailed through the corridors of Ecliptus Prime like restless ghosts. Cross was marched back to his quarters, chains biting, though the guards kept their distance. He could see the fear in their posture, the way their hands hovered near weapons though none dared act. Fear had replaced mockery. Fear had gravity. When the verdict arrived, it was compromise dressed as mercy. Humanity would not be expelled, nor would Cross be executed. But Earth's seat at the Accord would remain probationary, its every action scrutinized, its every misstep amplified. The Vainar delegation stormed away, unsatisfied but unwilling to ignite war. In the streets beyond, however, the story was already changing. To common citizens, to merchants and scholars, humanity had proven itself something new. Not simply odd, not simply noisy, but indomitable. Children played games in alleys, mimicking the slap and the crushing justice that followed. Traders approached human outposts with newfound wariness, yet also curiosity. What tools could a species wield that survived its own madness? What secrets lay in something as absurd, as unstoppable as duct tape? Nathaniel bore no triumph. He stood on the observation deck that night, staring into the endless sprawl of stars. His grin faltered in the reflection, revealing the weight beneath. He thought of every soldier buried, every laugh in the trenches, every mistake that still whispered in the quiet hours. And when Selene appeared beside him, silent, he feared her silence more than he feared the void. "Did I damn us?" he asked at last. She did not answer immediately. Her gaze drifted across the constellations, her reflection fragile against the glass. Finally, she said, "You showed them who we are, and sometimes I wonder if that's enough." Their hands brushed. Not a declaration, not yet, but a tether in the dark. Cross let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. The days that followed unfolded like the slow turning of a tide. Humanity remained in the Accord, yes, but as a guest watched too closely. Selene labored to draft new treaties, to soothe ruffled feathers with grace and patience. Cross became a symbol, whispered of with awe or dread depending on the tongue. He walked through alien markets with metals glinting, and doors opened both from fear and respect. He laughed less, though when he did, it carried weight. And always the footage played. The slap, the smile, the 3 seconds that echoed louder than centuries of diplomacy. On Earth, it was legend, replayed between reality shows and cheap commercials. Among the stars, it was myth, each retelling sharper than the last. One night, as broadcasts from Earth flickered across the Accord's feed, Selene laughed softly. "They're still convinced cats are apex predators." Cross chuckled, the sound carrying old warmth. Well, they're not wrong. And in that laugh, quiet and human, something shifted. The galaxy did not soften overnight, but it leaned, just slightly, toward something more than fear, toward the possibility of respect, of alliance, of hope. Remember this, reader, sometimes legends are born not from triumph, but from the moments when the world expects you to kneel and you do not. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in the crushing of a skull, but in the laughter that follows, defiant, unbroken. And if you must be remembered, let it be for the courage to stand, even when standing alone. The threat came not with a slap this time, but with silence. Reports filtered into the Accord chamber. The Vanar fleet mobilizing on the fringes of civilized space, their ships like serrated daggers poised to strike. Officially, it was maneuvers. Unofficially, it was preparation for war. They had not forgiven the skull shattered in front of billions, nor the laughter that followed. To them, humanity had spat in their face and walked away grinning. They wanted the galaxy to see humanity crushed. General Nathaniel Cross stood at the heart of the storm, summoned again before the 12. This time there were no chains. Chains had proven meaningless. His metals gleamed under the fractured light, though he felt each one burning into him like a brand. He did not grin now. He had learned that smiles, however sharp, could be mistaken for arrogance. He carried instead a calm, heavy stillness, the kind born only on battlefields. Selene Ward sat nearby, pale with exhaustion but fierce in her resolve. She had fought days without sleep, wrangling diplomats, calming markets, weaving words into fragile nets to hold the galaxy together. Yet nets tear when storms rise, and the Vanar were the storm. Her eyes flicked to Cross, not with sorrow now, but with trust sharpened by desperation. He was her blunt instrument, her unshakable wall, her soldier who could not be bent. The 12 debated, voices layering into discordant chords. Some argued humanity should be cast out to appease the Dominion. Others insisted humanity was the only thing keeping the Vanar honest. All agreed on one truth. A single slap had become a crucible, and from it the galaxy would either burn or be reforged. Cross broke the noise with words plain and dangerous. If they want war, they'll have it. But understand this. Humans don't fight wars the way you do. We don't duel with honor codes or keep battles tidy. We fight ugly. We fight until the enemy regrets existing. And we win. Not because we're stronger, not because we're smarter, but because we refuse to quit. His bluntness unsettled them more than threats ever could. The hall fell quiet, the echoes of his voice lingering like smoke. Later, in the dim corridors of Ecliptus Prime, Selene cornered him. "Do you hear yourself? You terrify them. They already think we're mad, violent, incapable of restraint." He leaned against the crystalline wall, expression unreadable. "Maybe that's what keeps us alive. Fear buys time." She shook her head, weariness trembling through her frame. Fear doesn't build peace. It only makes enemies plot in the dark. Their gazes clashed, friction sparking like flint against steel. But beneath it was something unspoken. She needed him, and he needed her belief. For all his defiance, Nathaniel feared one thing more than war, that she might one day see him as the barbarian the Council claimed he was. The crisis reached its peak when a Vanar warship entered restricted orbit above Ecliptus Prime. its cannons angled down toward the ceremonial city, daring the Accord to act. Panic roared through the streets. Citizens fled, traders shuttered shops, children cried in languages too many to count. The Accord's defense fleets hesitated. To fire first meant war, to hesitate meant surrender. Paralysis gripped them. Cross did not wait. He boarded a human shuttle, patched together with duct tape and stubborn engineering, and flew straight for the warship. The Accord screamed for him to turn back. Celine's voice trembled over the comms, begging him not to ignite the galaxy. He said nothing, only let his grin return as he gunned the engines. The shuttle was dwarfed by the Vanar vessel, a gnat before a predator. But when the comms opened, Nathaniel's voice filled every channel, broadcast unbidden across the Accord. You think humanity kneels? You think you can slap us, threaten us, and we'll crawl? This is your mistake. We don't crawl. We crawl out of graves, out of ruins, out of the ashes of worlds. And every time, we rise laughing. The Vanar commander spat venom, vowing humanity's extinction. Cross let the threat hang, then chuckled. You might try, but here's the problem with trying to scare humans. We scare ourselves worse every day. We invented horror movies for fun. We strap ourselves to rockets with no guarantees. We eat burritos that could kill lesser species. You'll never out-crazy us. The galaxy laughed and gasped. Billions heard the defiance. Billions saw one small ship facing a war fleet without flinching. The Vanar, unprepared for mockery in the face of annihilation, hesitated. That hesitation cost them their momentum. Accord fleets moved in, surrounding the warship, emboldened by human recklessness. The Dominion withdrew, snarling promises of future retribution, but retreating nonetheless. The city erupted in relief. Cheers, laughter, disbelief that such madness had worked. To the Accord's citizens, humanity had gone from tolerated guests to wild guardians who stood when no one else dared. The legend of the slap was now joined by the legend of the stand. Nathaniel returned to Ecliptus Prime battered but alive. Celine met him on the docking bay, fury and relief warring in her face. She struck his chest with her fist. You could have died. He grinned, metals rattling. Wouldn't be the first time. She wanted to scream, to curse him, to weep, but instead she let her forehead rest against his, just for a breath. In that moment, no words were needed. Trust had been reforged, not by diplomacy, not by restraint, but by standing together on the edge of destruction. In the days that followed, the Accord's verdict softened. Humanity was no longer probationary. They were indispensable. Fear still lingered, but alongside it came respect, fascination, and, in some corners, admiration. Traders sought earth goods. Scholars studied human humor like scripture. Children across species tied medals to their clothes and played at being the general. Nathaniel, for his part, no longer laughed as easily. His grin remained, but now it carried weight, tempered by the knowledge of how close they had come to ruin. Celine stayed at his side, her sharp words balancing his reckless ones, her calm softening his defiance. Together, they became not just symbols of humanity, but its living paradox, warrior and diplomat, laughter and restraint, duct tape and ink. And so the story closed, not with war, but with something rarer, a fragile peace, held together by fear, humor, and hope in equal measure. Humanity had not been tamed, and perhaps never would be. But in their madness, the galaxy saw possibility. Remember this, reader. History does not remember the careful whispers of the cautious. It remembers the ones who stand when standing seems impossible, who laugh when laughter seems absurd, who dare when all others tremble. If you must carve your place in a hostile world, carve it not with apologies, but with courage stitched together, like everything else we build, with duct tape, stubbornness, and the refusal to kneel.